Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Literary as Feck. What number is this, Clive? Do you have any idea? No, me neither. But it's shockingly high, all said and done. Like we've done a lot of these.
Mm.
Um,
You're starting to feel the wear and tear there, Nick.
yes, all this reading is really hard on the brain and the eyes. Um, so yeah, so this time it was my choice, and partly because this is a bit of a stopgap. To be honest, we for various reasons things we're supposed to do didn't quite happen, and I hadn't read something quite long, and then Clive didn't get a book in the mail that he was supposed to have gotten, so I picked something that was going to be quick, but I didn't realize quite how quick. It's
Yeah, it's pretty brief.
I don't know if it qualifies as a novel at all. It almost qualifies as a slightly long short story. I
It's
don't even have,
slightly an overpriced Kindle.
yes, for sure, for what it is. But what it is a case of rape by Chester Himes. And
Hmm.
we haven't talked about Chester. He might have come up in some of our discussions at different times, but I don't. We've never specifically, I think, talked about him. We
Right.
haven't read
I
anything
think
by.
because um, both of us have read, I think, all
Folks.
of his most famous series, the Coffin and Gravedigger series,
Yeah,
prior to having started doing this show. So unless we
yeah.
go back but the thing is with that is, I don't really know. I might actually fancy to do that one day, but it would be the whole series, I think. Like I can't
Yes.
pinpoint one that I'd want to go back to.
No,
Like it would have to be
no.
the whole. And to be
We'll
honest, it
start.
wouldn't take that long.
No, because they're not. I mean, actually, I have some of them here. They're
Right.
all quite slim
Yeah. How
volumes.
many are there? Are they nine or something?
About that, yeah.
Right.
Starting with A Rage in Harlem, which was adapted, right, as
Yes.
with Forrest Whitaker. Um,
Well, no, better than that with Screaming Jay Hawkins.
yes. um, but it's not called that though, right? Oh no, sorry, hang on. It is called A Rage in Harlem. That's what the movie
Yes.
was called. But
Yes.
I think the book was originally For the Love
Something
of
else, and it
Imogel.
was retitled. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And of
and
course,
then
then before that, movie-wise, there was Cotton Comes to Harlem and
Come
Come
Back
Back
Charleston.
Charleston Blue, which are, I mean,
Yeah,
Cotton Comes to Harlem is proper good, from what I
the
remember.
movie
Yeah.
and the book is fantastic as
Oh, the book,
well.
yeah,
But yes,
of course, all the books are pretty good. But the Cotton Comes to Harlem, the film is good. And then you've seen both the films, right?
yes,
Yeah. And then Come Back Charleston Blue is kind of interesting because it's not as good as Cotton Comes to Harlem by any means. But what is interesting about it is that it's an interesting companion piece to the later um, Ridley Scott film American Gangster, right? Because they're based on the same characters.
oh,
And
like real life characters,
yes, and in
right?
the Ridley Scott film, the played by Denzel Washington, he's kind of like very much a kind of a heroic kind of Robin Hood figure, almost like
Hmm.
giving back to the community. There's like opening scene where they're giving out like turkeys at Christmas Day or something like
Right.
that. But it's funny to see this film from the 70s, um, which holds no truck with that at all. Like
Hmm.
that character is just
More jaundiced
yes,
eye, yeah.
yeah, which is kind of interesting to compare the two. I think I
Hmm.
tend to probably believe the Comeback Charles and Blue take on
Yes.
things. And there has since been a American Gangster TV series as well, right? With your man Forrest Whitaker,
Okay.
which I haven't seen any of,
No,
but
no.
I'm guessing that's more in the vein of the Ridley Scott Denzel take.
Right.
But you never know. You never know. It might. I'm certainly going to give it a try, a few episodes anyway, at some point.
I will say the only thing that is disappointing when you watch almost all the film versions is that the characters of Gravedigger and Coffin Ed are so they're so well drawn in the books, and like one of them is hideously scarred, like he gets acid thrown in his face in the very
Mm.
first book, and he's almost like a Batman villain after that, right?
Right.
They make a point of like his face is kind of scarred white, so he's got this kind of half of a white face, and then um yeah, and so and they're both kind of boiling with anger and intensity. And much as I do like Godfrey, is it Godfrey St. James? Is that his name? The actor who played
Or is it Godfrey? For some reason, I'm thinking his
Godfrey
name
Cambridge.
Godfrey Cambridge. Yeah.
Cambridge, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Godfrey Cambridge. Yeah. So Godfrey Cambridge, who I really like, and he's amazing in Watermelon Man.
Mm,
Um, uh, but um, but yeah, he's a bit too happy-go-lucky, a bit too kind of wink and fun, and neither of them really put across that side of the books where
right.
they're real scary
I tell you
dudes.
who would have been good, would have been if they ever tried it again, is Lance, what's his name? The guy who he was like a police captain in The
Yes,
Wire, and he was
yes,
later in the Fringe TV series.
yes, yeah, absolutely,
He's got that
exactly. Yeah,
intensity, I think.
yeah. Yeah. In fact, I mean, if somebody would do something like, I mean, if you could imagine, it would be a pretty prestige thing, but if you could do the Harlem Detective books as a kind of
With a
wire
mini. Yeah,
style,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
It's
Um,
something I've always thought would be like it's only a matter of time. I don't know if it's a rights thing or something, but yeah, that would just be phenomenal. That's something that definitely has to happen. Like,
yeah.
and do it right, right? Like, take your time, cast it well,
Mhm.
do it properly, and all the materials there, right? Like, you don't have to. I don't know. I don't even think there's anything. I mean, it's been a while since I read them, but is there anything in them problem that would be problematic nowadays in terms of like use of casual racism and stuff like that? Like, I don't remember
Oh,
them that way.
no, I don't think so. And I mean, the only thing is and this when we talk about a case of rape is that sometimes there's a tendency where you just be like, okay, now Chester is just talking, right? Like now he's just using his characters as mouthpieces, and there's
Right.
always a scene or two where Coffin Ed and Gravedigger will like talk to their white police chief or whatever, and those scenes always just a little, it just they always feel a little bit over the top. Uh,
Polemical.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a screenwriter's job, right? To tidy that up. So yeah.
Right. But other than that, no, I think you're right.
We're
And
available, by the way, if anyone wants to hire us.
yeah, well, who better than us?
Yes, exactly. We are clearly the voice of the African American in the 1950s.
Yeah.
A couple of pale faces
Yes.
born in the 70s.
Halfway around the world, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, so yeah, I mean, so clearly, if you're, we're both big fans. And so
Yes.
if you haven't, yeah, Cotton Comes to Harlem, incredible book, The Real Cool Killers, Heat's On. By the time you get to here, this is interesting. This because you mentioned, and I didn't have time, I couldn't find a copy of doing as a sister piece, brother piece to this book,
Right.
Plan B,
Yes.
right, which was unfinished at the time of Chester Himes' death, but apparently was abandoned in favor of this instead.
Okay.
And if you
Which is
think
a great book. I mean,
this is a great book, and it's an angry
yes,
book,
fantastic ending.
yeah, but uh, it's a bed of roses compared to Plan B.
Okay. Okay.
Plan B is something else entirely. Plan B is absolutely apocalyptic. It's it's almost like yeah, it's and it
Recommend it
isn't.
then.
I no, it's kind of hard
Oh,
because it's not it doesn't feel of a piece with the other books at all. It feels like it's dropped in from Mars. It feels like it was written out of a place of pure anger. I'm
well,
assuming it's probably written post Malcolm X being assassinated and this
well,
kind of like,
well,
I think he started to lose any hope that there was anything other than a race war coming. And so he wrote a book about race war. He wrote a
well,
book
here's a
based
question
on,
to you
yeah.
then. Is that because for me, until we'd read today's book, I had only ever read the Gravedigger and Coffin Ed books, right? So outside of those, how many other like of I suppose that you'd call them his serious books, right? How many of the Chester Himes books have you read? other
The
than
only the only other than the Harlem Detective
yeah.
Cycle, the only one I've read is this one, which has this incredible cover.
Oh, I think
Um,
I've read that.
and I think you read this too. I think I had this one when I lived in Japan.
Yes,
I don't remember.
yes.
But
For
this
some
is
reason,
very
I seem
much
to remember. I think I might have retroactively put that into the
well, because it
Harlem
really
series.
fits. It really
Right,
feels like a
right,
piece.
right.
And I think it's written between a couple of those books. So it's not. So we should say that Chester, as a young man, spent a little bit of time in prison, and
There's a
then
sorry, in the past few years, there's a brand new biography about him, which I'm quite keen to read.
okay,
In fact,
and I,
I have a really old Chester Highlands, but like a really slim one. I should have dug it
okay,
up. That I found like in Jimbo for like 200 yen or something. And it's like
I might have read that. You might maybe you had that
I
when
might
we
have done.
were
It's a very,
yeah, 'cause
very
I might have
slim
read it.
little
Yeah.
volume.
And I also should say the other thing that I've read is I've read half of his autobiography. He released it
Ah,
basically in two volumes.
yes.
And the second volume is called The Quality of Hurt. And I read that and liked it a lot. And I've always wanted to read the first volume of his child. It's like same thing with what's his face? Cockfighter, not Monty Hellman, the writer, Williford.
Charles Williford.
Yeah, I've read half of his, like I've read
Uh-huh.
one of the two volumes of his autobiography as well, and it's amazing, and haven't been able to find the other half. But anyway, the quality of Hurt's really good.
I think the other Charles Williford, isn't it? I'm looking for a street or something.
That's the one. Yes.
There is a cheapest chips Kindle, or there was of that now.
Okay.
You could finally complete
Read
it.
it. Have you read it already?
I
If
think yes, yes,
okay, all right.
yes,
Okay, because
yes.
if not, that would be something we could talk about here, but never mind. But anyway, so yeah, no, I haven't read. So he comes out of prison, and I think in prison he starts writing, and even maybe starts getting published. He comes out and he writes, I guess, serious, worthy
Yeah.
novels, right?
But the other thing as well that happens in prison, which is quite interesting, which I didn't realize is because they skip over it a little bit. The only reason I remember it's because I was reading, I think in the New York Review of Books or the London Review of Books, when the recent biography of him came out, there was an extended review of it, and
Hmm.
so one thing that happened, it wasn't just because I think it was dual robbery or something, right? And
Yes.
he ended up in prison for a while. But the other thing that happened when he was in prison was there was this massive horrendous prison fire.
Okay. Yes, I seem to remember this vaguely.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and apparently there's a lot of that in that recent biography. And that was a like a properly traumatic event because he was locked in as the place was like raging and there was people dying all around and of course you can imagine, you know, um depending on maybe they thought young black men were slightly more expendable than
Mhm.
young white men in prison. So so that was a very pivotal. I mean, yeah, you can understand where the rage comes from. Let's put it
Yeah.
that
Yeah. No question. Yeah. Yeah.
way.
There was his lived experience. And oh, and also, yeah. So he was sorry, there was sorry, I'm on the Wikipedia page here, right? But it was was it him or his brother who actually ended up having chemicals splashed in his face, and then he
All
was
right.
blinded, and then because of Jim Crow laws, the hospital refused to admit him and treat him, and so basically, obviously that was another thing that he was just like, fuck this, this system is
Well, yeah,
complete.
yeah. Plus, I'm guessing something along the lines of I've had acid thrown in my face. Okay. Was it a white man that did it? Yeah. Well, I'm afraid no crime has been committed here, so
Yeah, yeah. So basically, he writes a couple of novels, which I think are highly thought of, but are not particularly successful, right? They're not selling like hotcakes or whatever, right? And
right.
then he ultimately just gets sick of the States and moves to France.
Hmm.
And in France, um, he's approached by a French like publishing house who are doing these kind of like uh, well, they're the people who are publishing Jim Thompson, right?
Hmm.
They're the people who are publishing that whole série noire, right?
Right.
Series. They approach him and they're like, "Would you consider writing like crime books, like detective books and stuff?" And he's like, "Why not?" And so it wasn't necessarily that the whole Harlem cycle was partly, yeah, well, it wasn't necessarily his idea to do it. but
No.
once he got started, yeah,
Well,
he felt
this is the thing. Sometimes the necessity is the mother of invention, right? And
yeah.
artists fight back against, no, I want to keep my way. I don't want to do this kind of watered down. I want a commercial
Mhm.
thing. But then sometimes that's exactly what you need,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And those books, yeah, that series is a fantastic, like, because you just breeze through them as well, right? I don't think I've ever actually read them. One of the reasons I'm tempted to go back is to read them in order.
In order,
I
yes,
just kind
and
of read them scattered.
they do make a certain amount of sense. But as I said, they get increasingly bleak, and then
Yeah,
Plan B basically was his end to the series, right? I mean, he spoilers, but he kills both of them, right? He
right,
kills Coffin
right.
and um and he just and they're almost not even in the book. They're very tangential characters.
It's funny, I don't think of that book as part of that series either. So yeah,
Right. And then apparently he ultimately abandoned the book and decided to write Blind Man with a Pistol instead, which is also very, very
yeah,
intense.
it's a bit like, I suppose it was a bit like what happened with Will Lifford when he couldn't get Graves
Yes.
published and he turned it into the the Hawk Mosley books, which are somewhat more digestible, right? But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, what
again,
was
I'm
it?
so glad that happened because Gravesend eventually did sneak out. You can read it.
Yeah.
And plus you've got these fun Hawk Mosley books as well,
Books.
right? So
Yes.
I'm certainly not complaining about the way that played out.
No. And so anyway, I guess we should talk about this
Yeah, there we go. Padding done.
novella, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. The first half of it, I was like, what even is this? Like, is this like what is
Yeah.
like? It almost seemed like it wasn't a novel at all, or like
Well,
even a short story, because
the
there was barely.
first third is actually an introduction by someone else, isn't it?
Well,
To
yes, there's
put it into
that.
context, which
Yes,
is
that's
was
fair.
kind of interesting.
Yes,
I'm kind of glad that was there because at least it made it feel as if I read an entire book. And
right. Um,
but no, it does make for some interesting context, even though it's a little bit because there's so much polemical stuff in the book. It was almost like a hat on a hat, a
yes,
bit,
yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I have to admit the actual. So you should explain what the story is.
Yeah, well, so that's what's kind of hard to do, just in as much as like when I was started to read it, it felt like almost like a Cliff's Notes, a Cole's Notes. Like it didn't feel like a novel or a short story at the beginning. It felt like newspaper reported
It's like
or
an
some.
article or something, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
an essay. Yeah,
really. And
yeah,
it slowly transmogrifies into by about halfway through. You're like, oh no, there are kind of characters emerging out of this like
yeah. Well,
sketch.
it's an interesting. I was thinking about this. It's a literary form as well, which is maybe I noticed this after I came to Japan. The essay, like obviously we have the essay and you have collections
Mhm.
in English and stuff, but I feel as if somehow the essay has been given a little bit of short thrift in like you don't often like people talk about novels and short stories, but you don't often have like people putting out essay collections, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
in Japan, it's a big thing. Like, it's quite common to have
Mm.
like just essay. My missus, for example, she reads a lot of, you know, um, author themed
Okay.
essay collections.
Right.
It's a. So I'm wondering if it's something more common in France maybe as well. But in the English language, that kind of essay, like you might find it in a magazine or something, but
Hmm.
not like this, not in
Yeah.
this.
No. No. It's just funny. I think like what's that the French depressing like Houellebecq or whatever, however you say his name.
Oh,
Um,
yes, I know who you mean.
yeah, yeah. I feel like he.
Atomized, that guy.
The atomized guy. I feel like he kind of dabbles in that sort of thing. Maybe so. Again, you may be right. Maybe it's a more European.
Welbeck, right? Something Welbeck.
Welbeck. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
think it was only one of those names like that was around the whole time a few years ago, but I haven't heard much about him recently. Um,
no, a bit like what's and who's the other the guy who directed Carne and I Stand Alone.
Gaspar Noé.
Yeah, is he still? I
Oh,
mean,
he's still putting things out. Yeah.
I felt like he
In
was
fact, he
kind of
made a
he.
film a couple of years ago now which I haven't seen it actually, but it's more of a drama than but it's notable for starring and apparently giving an excellent performance, Dario Argento.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
would not have expected that.
No.
Huh.
Um,
Um,
but anyway, so it's
yes.
this is a
So yeah,
novel. Well, this is a book from
Yep.
1963,
Yep.
right? And the basic setup is it's set in Paris, and I think all our main protagonists are expat American,
African
right?
Americans. Yep.
Well, apart from the white,
And one
yeah.
American white. Yes. Yeah.
And so basically, what has definitely happened is a white woman has been found dead in a
Hmm.
hotel room after having overdosed on Spanish
Aphrodisiac.
fly.
Yep.
Um,
Which, funnily enough, we might be talking about in another show very soon because the Marquis de Sade rather famously uh, accidentally deliberately poisoned some lady. One of his
right,
like yeah.
right.
Anyway,
So yes, but she was found, yeah, in a room with four African American guys,
yeah.
one of whom was kind of her boyfriend, and then yeah, it's basically
And
it's
also importantly, like the pathologist or whatever or the forensics discovers that she has had sex multiple times.
well,
This
I was slightly confused
in
by
on the same day that she died, basically,
right,
right?
there we go then. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the thing, is they're not sure exactly what it seems like an open and shut case that this woman's been drugged and kind of raped to death because so Spanish flies and I had to look this up actually. So yeah, apparently in its original form, which is from a green beetle, right?
Beetle, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spanish fly is actually well, it's highly toxic, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, it's a poison. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, if you take too
And as
much
I
of
said,
it, it will
The
kill
Marquis
you.
de Sade
All
famously,
inflamed and yeah.
yeah, yeah, as I said, like the Marquis de Sade nearly killed a girl.
Yes. And I don't know
By,
if it ever does actually have any sort of aphrodisiac.
I suspect probably
But it's
not.
interesting because now you can buy some watered down thing that isn't that at all, right? But
Okay.
because the reason I remember a friend of mine here uh before going out on the town, he'd rub himself down with like this Spanish fly. Uh,
Musk.
yeah, like almost like like
Right.
top to bottom, he'd cover himself. He'd be glistening in this kind of Spanish fly. And his idea was, well, I think he thought number one, it like attracted just the aroma of it.
Hmm.
And the idea was apparently, yeah, once you started getting it on, like if you licked some off your skin or something, like she'd be driven insane with the
Right. Right.
lust. I don't think it has good. I think it
Uh-huh.
just added to his laundry bill or something. I don't know.
Right.
Um, but yes,
Yes.
that's the thing. And then yeah, you get a bit of a like a Rashomon kind of seeing
Yeah.
from either sides, and that's fine for a while. But then they enter a character, and again, it's like reportage rather than
Yeah.
from any first person or third person or
Yeah.
anything really.
Like
Um,
there's no virtually no dialogue. So as I said, like so it
no,
really doesn't read like a short story or a novel at all.
or police report.
Yeah.
And then so enter the character of it. So that's when it gets kind of murky. Then is there's basically there's another African American writer
Hmm.
who's been kind of tasked with kind of investigating it, not police investigation, just to investigate it to see if any racism was involved,
Yeah.
and then he brings all this other baggage, and then when it
Yeah.
gets and I don't know if but it is kind of interesting because what struck me about reading this is quite interesting if you think about it, because there's racism, right? There's like racism, and then there's very specific American racism,
Yeah.
and then you have like racism against blacks in general, but then you have racism against African Americans being
Yeah.
a very specific thing. And what's kind of interesting about what Chester Himes is trying to do is not only is he trying to pass that, and he talks about, all the different kind of weird convolutions about like how like these Americans, their interaction like with these the black guys in some ways kind of idealized and looking up at the white woman, but then at the same time the white woman's not racist, but at the same time, because black men have always been nice to her, she thinks, oh, black men will always be nice to a white, like it hasn't even, she doesn't think of it in terms of because that's the right thing to do. It's more like, and he goes through all these different possible variations on what, and that's just within the relationship between the Americans, right, of
Yes.
whatever color. But then he puts on this extra layer of, well, how does this play out in France? And there's this whole fascinating sequence, which it does seem now a little bit, it seems a little box ticking national stereotype thing, but he goes on about how the different, because he almost, as if it really happened, he said how all the newspapers of the world reported it, right? And in
Right.
France there wasn't a matter, and then in Africa it played this way, and then and you're thinking, okay, these are all based on national stereotypes, right? Rather than,
Some degree, yes, yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and in France they
But
said sacre bleu, and then over, and it was just all the like,
although, fun enough, he credits the Chinese press with being the most sympathetic.
yes,
Uh, yeah,
yes.
which is interesting. But then I guess maybe that's just a weapon to kind of
Exactly, because that's what the Soviet, yeah. So it's like a
right.
weird. It's like, in films sometimes when when Godzilla attacks or something, they go to all the newscasters around the
Yes,
world. Like it
yes,
seemed a little bit like a
yeah,
like
Mamma
a
mia! Yeah,
literary version of that. But I kind of, I see what he's doing, and then on top of that, he's layering stuff about, just kind of the battle of the sexes as well, right? And he's layering,
yes,
well, is this only problematic because some of the guys were black and she was a white woman, and that's his saying. Well, the French don't seem to care about that because it doesn't occur to them that that would be an issue. Not that you don't have issues of race in France, but it's a different setup. It's a different
yeah.
style.
The history is different, and he
Yeah,
does go in. He takes you through each of the four men who are in the room, and he kind of unpacks over generations, like where they trace their lineage from, and that of
yeah,
course some of them have, a variety of different blood in them. Where they have white blood, they have
yeah,
African blood, and so on. And so,
and all
yeah,
the
just
different pathologies as well, right? And
yes,
how. So it's interesting because he, rather than, it's interesting normally when you, because this isn't really a murder mystery, but usually when you have a crime and something's, because there's the other element is he's trying to point out which evidence hadn't been used because it was
right,
deliberately. So usually this kind of thing aims at a sort of clarity, right? But what
mhm,
it seems to be doing here is like deliberately
yes,
like
muddying the
muddying the
waters.
waters, and
Yes,
kind of, I mean, to my kind of chickens out a bit at the end actually and just says, we are all to blame. Like that's,
right, right.
I don't know if that really washed with me, to be honest with you. But
Mhm,
it's I suppose because it's so brisk, you don't have a chance to get bored. Maybe if it was
yeah,
500 pages long, I might have lost
yes,
patience. But it is a kind of fascinating attempt at maybe taking something that seems fairly cut and dry and then just examining in what potentially might be going on, right? In all sorts of and bringing different life experiences and stuff like that, and also um Chester Himes himself obviously working through some
yes,
things himself, right? It's
yeah,
it's almost like a therapy on the page or something. Um, I mean, it doesn't really work as anything. I don't think it doesn't
no.
work as a novel or an essay or a piece of polemic, but
Mm,
maybe because it's brief, I found it
okay.
kind of. I'm glad it seems like a piece of the Chester Himes puzzle
Yes.
rather than in and of itself. And actually,
Yeah.
even though we were planning to match it up with something else because it seemed a little,
Sweet.
yeah, I'm kind of glad to have isolated it in a way because
Mhm.
it is an odd little lab specimen to take a look at.
And there's a few things that kind of, I mean, oh, we should say again, indulging in stereotypes, but it turns out, spoilers, that the person who had had sex with the woman multiple times the day that she dies is her husband, sort of ex-husband, their kind of estranged husband, who is French and a sex maniac, basically,
Right.
right? And in fact, it turns out is more attracted to his wife now that she's been sleeping with this African American guy. This kind of turns him on in some way that he's been cuckolded and kind
Yes.
of wants her back. Which,
And they found fragments of baguette inside the vagina.
yes, an
Yeah.
onion skin.
Yes.
But
So
but no,
horrendous stereotype.
I think no, but it is, he does make a few comments about just like generally the European male being like highly oversexed and kind of like
Hmm.
which is funny. But no, but it did make me think like, so this is written in what, like, the 60s, right? But like in the 80s, um Donald Trump made a bit of a name for himself, right? By famously going hard after those young men who were
Oh, the
accused of the
Central Park
wilding. Yeah, the
5 or whatever.
wildings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as it turned out, they were all innocent, right?
Right.
And much in the way of the story. So I mean, it's funny, not funny, but it's like, he's not wrong. I mean, the book is not
Oh,
wrong.
no, 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 no,
In
no.
these circumstances, the conclusion will be jumped to immediately that these men are criminals, that these men have done. Because I mean, are they given the death penalty?
No,
No, they're
because
not.
no, they're given life imprisonment. Yeah.
Life imprisonment, right? But the idea is if they'd been in the US, that they would have
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
given the death penalty. Um, and
Well, yeah,
so
I suppose what he's doing in a way is he's kind of he's kind of he deliberately he deliberately presents a situation that just seems like if you'd have stumbled across it would have just seemed almost beneath investigation. Like this is
an
clearly
open, an
something
open and shut
nefarious
case.
has happened here, right? And it's almost laughable the other side of the story. Well, it's because it's kind of cartoonish, right? Like, oh, she
Mhm.
accidentally downed this Spanish fly and suddenly started ripping her clothes off. And the one time some French people look up at the window, she's like topless in the window, going "Help, help!" And there's some dudes dragging her back in, and
Right.
it's almost like he's gone out of his way to
But
present
that's very
something.
Chester Himes.
Yeah,
That scene is the most, because in all of his books, there's a really dark comedy that runs
right.
through his books, right?
But it's like this is take it to the extreme example of how guilty a bunch of dudes could look, and then let's go and find like a rationale. So it's,
Mhm.
it's like it's deliberate, like the pillars are like he's deliberately chosen, like
Yes.
and then found a way in which maybe they weren't guilty, and how unlikely a conclusion that would. But along the way, he, to be fair to him, he deliberately as well doesn't just come, and that's because of the race issue. Like he
Yep.
dances around the whole thing. Well, no, maybe because of this, and maybe because of that, and
Yep.
maybe it isn't a race thing. And then by the time the book ends, you're just left kind of. I don't know if I found um the mental exercise, as
Mhm.
part of it interesting in the same
Mhm.
way as a lot of kind of philosophical thoughts can be. You could just be at a cocktail party, because we're always going to cocktail parties. Like, we
Right,
could be
all the
going to a
time.
cocktail party and someone brings
Engaged in
up.
thought experiments.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah, and you just think about, what is it, and you have a little chat about it, and then you forget about it. So I appreciate that it maybe made my mind think about certain possibilities but
Mhm.
ultimately I don't know if I really benefited about or thought anything that I'd never thought before, really.
Right. Yes. But that's probably because we were born in the mid 70s and did
Well,
most of our
that's the
growing up
thing as
in
well.
that.
Yes,
And
it is.
so
It is very
so yeah.
much of it, and that's the other thing I was trying to figure out as well was would this have been a bit more impactful 60 years ago?
Think so. I would think so. I mean, you
I
think that
guess.
like the US wasn't even fully desegregated, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And
But then again,
so
yeah, I don't know. I'm wondering who would have read, because again, that's the thing. I mean, who would have read this in the States? I have no idea. Like, it seems it would have been more of an intellectual exercise that had been read by the French more than,
right,
yeah.
right. Maybe Frantz Fanon, he might have read it. Um, I've never
Yeah,
read The
so like,
Wretched Year. I've always meant to, that's one of those things that like I've read the title of numerous times and I've never actually read. Someday
right,
I'll get to.
right. But
Um,
yeah, so I don't know, where do we come down on this one? I mean, I mean,
it's not the place to start
it's
with
oh
your
no,
Chester
no, no, no,
Himes.
no, no.
It's
If
not the place to start your
no,
Chester
if
Himes.
you're thinking, I want to get into that Chester Himes, he sounds like a lot of fun. Oh, what's this? Case Rave, this would be good. No,
No,
no.
no. So yeah, start if you start with the Harlem Detective series. Either start with the first one, A Rage in Harlem, or go straight to Cotton Comes to Harlem, which is probably the most
Yeah.
famous of his books.
But
Um,
but 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 for those of you who already kind of a little bit annoyed, I mean, I don't know, because Chester Himes is such a fascinating character. I'm kind of glad I did.
yeah. Eventually, I will. I tend to read all of them. I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think
there's not
so.
a ton left for me to read, so I'll quite happily read everything he wrote.
Hmm. Well, there we go then. So yeah,
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
really have much
No,
to
no.
uh,
But I'm
say
glad,
about it.
I'm glad I read this as well. And as once I got over the stumbling block of realizing that it was very different than most of what I'd read from him before, in that it was this much more pared down. It didn't have that like there's a sense of like in his novels, a real sense of place, a sense of the smells and the sights
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah,
kind
yeah, yeah,
of,
yeah.
this is very bare bones. Um,
Well,
but
I was wondering how, because those things, if you include Run Man Run, is a very specific thing, and then I'm just wondering, because we both haven't read that much outside. I'm
mhm.
wondering if this is more typical of other Chester Himes books or not. I sense that it maybe isn't.
No,
That it
probably.
falls in some kind of middle ground between one and the other. Yeah. I suppose we'll find out because we will be for
Yes.
another project coming up. We'll be reading a little bit more Chester Himes, not for this, but for something else.
Mhm.
Um, right. Should we get out of here?
We shall.
I'm ready
Okay.
to leave the house. I'm oiled up
Oh,
like a
excellent.
Spanish fly. Don't wait up for me, Nick.
Oh, I shan't. Good hunting.
Me and Pat Mustard are hitting the town.